high school English class having to learn about similes, personifications, and reading 10-page metaphors about just a single tree branch. All these literary devices, they just convolute the message that the author is trying to convey and make it impossible to understand anything that the author is trying to say in his or her book. Is there even a point to analyze all of these devices in English class? Or is it really just a giant waste of time? Well, let's find out. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Striking Talks channel, and I'll be your host, The Striker, and in this video, we're going to be examining, is literature class actually worth it, or is it just one of the most useless classes you'll ever have to take? So, let's begin. So in literature class in high school, or maybe in college, you're learning how to interpret different types of texts and find hidden meaning. You know, all these literary devices are when authors say one thing, but they mean something completely different. For example, if you take a look at symbolism, an author might describe an object, but there's actually a hidden meaning behind what that object represents. But sometimes I wonder, do authors actually strategize and plan out all of these complicated and hidden messages that they want the readers to interpret? It's like giving the readers a puzzle and having them puzzle out and figure out what the hidden meaning the author is trying to convey. The reason I began thinking about this is because of a Socratic seminar I remember having way back in my sophomore literature class in high school. So, back in high school, we had to read this book that I'm sure everybody had to read called To Kill a Mockingbird, where, let me just tell you, this book is filled with symbolism, devices, and all sorts of other things all throughout the book. But I remember that during this discussion, when we had to analyze different characters, I was talking about this ant that appears in this book. So basically there's this ant that essentially takes care of her nephew, who's one of the main characters. He's about a teenager, and a little girl, who's his sister. So I remember saying in the discussion that the author included that ant in that story, and she's having her influence the nephew because your teenage years are where you are most malleable and your opinions start to change and they start to formulate towards the end of your adolescence. But then I began to wonder, did the author actually include the ant in all of that dialogue because of the interpretation that I had come up with? Or is there some other interpretation or other reason that the author included the ant, and my prediction or my interpretation was completely off what the author had intended? One of my biggest worries is that the authors included these devices not because they want readers to come up with interpretations, but simply because it sounds good. In this case, it means that we're wasting all of our time analyzing these devices, when in reality, the author included them just because they sounded good, not because there's a hidden meaning. You might be wondering why I'm having such thoughts, and to explain that, we have to look at another form of art, music. So in music, a lot of musicians learn music theory, and music theory explains a lot of the fundamentals and basics of music. In other words, it explains why music sounds good, and you can use these techniques to make your music good. In fact, many musicians, especially classical musicians, would use all sorts of techniques in music theory to enhance their songs and make them more pleasurable to listen to. However, so there's one band I want to talk about in particular, and that's the Beatles. So what makes the Beatles so special? Well, the Beatles actually did not have that strong of a knowledge in music theory, and they didn't apply it to their songs as much as some other bands might have done. In fact, when the band was inquired, Paul McCartney even said that they just included stuff in their songs simply because it sounded good, not because they had used and researched some technique that would be awesome. They just played around with their instruments, and there were some sounds that sounded really great, so they threw them into a song. The thing that's absolutely hilarious is that there's all of these YouTube channels and videos where people are breaking down the Beatles' music and talking about all the theory that they used and all of the techniques that they used to evoke certain emotions, when in reality, they just included them because it sounded good, not because they had some crazy plan in mind. So that got me thinking, what if authors are doing the exact same thing that the Beatles did? They're not including all sorts of literary devices because they want their readers to uncover a certain hidden message, but they're including it simply because it sounds good, or at least they think it sounds good. That's it. They just want to throw in some fluff into their books so it appeals to their readers and it sounds somewhat interesting. There's no hidden message in there. So all those days of writing huge essays about all the fiction books that we have to read in school, were they actually meant to teach us something? Or do we just waste all of our time analyzing and interpreting words in books that were simply not meant to be interpreted? We were simply supposed to interpret the words exactly how they were written and simply admire the fact that the words sound good on their own and no complex explanation is necessary. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed what you saw today, subscribe, leave a like, turn on notifications. Have a great day. Peace out, folks.